Good morning. Our speaker this morning is part of the Content Partnerships team at Google Incorporated in Mountain View, California. There he works with content partners to incorporate their information into Google's many products and services. He joined Google as a result of its acquisition of FeedBurner Incorporated here in Chicago, then the world's largest manager of RSS feeds. Prior to FeedBurner, he held senior roles at several software and internet companies, often focusing on marketing and business development. He has provided technology advice to 2 U.S. presidential campaigns, and he ran the campaign weblog for Senator Barack Obama's 2004 race for the Senate. He is the co-author of 3 books about the internet, co-author of a long-running technology column for the American Bar Association, and has presented to more than 70 audiences about the impact of technology on business, politics, and society. You've probably read his comments in the Wall Street Journal, USA Today, Newsweek, the Washington Post, InfoWorld, CIO Magazine, Information Week, and many others. His work has been featured on CNN, in the New York Times, and Wired Magazine. He is a graduate of Lafayette College in Easton, Pennsylvania, and is the University of Richmond School of Law in Richmond, Virginia. Our speaker is a member of the ELCA and a member of the trustees of Augsburg Fortress, the publishing ministry of the ELCA. He and his wife, Robin, have 3 children and live in San Ramon, California. You remember him from the 2005 ELCA Communicators Conference, and he's back with us again by popular demand. Really, I was on the planning team. It was hands down popular demand. He will speak to us today on tending your beeps, measuring your online efforts for maximum effectiveness. People of God, please welcome Rick Klau.
I want to start out by thanking all of you. I need to make sure my wife knows that there's a group of people who want to see me. And that's a great way to start a Friday morning. In all seriousness, I do want to thank you. 2 years ago, I was in front of many of you and honestly had no idea what I was getting into. John, as you may recall, Brooks had come up to me after a presentation and told me I needed to come and speak to Lutherans, and I didn't know if that was a punishment or an invitation. And I came really, the night before, I still remember coming in front of the group, no idea why you wanted to hear from me and whether what I was going to say was going to be at all valuable. I have since told folks that presentation stands as the most impactful I've ever given. And that is a testament to you more than it is to me. Because out of that presentation, dozens of you started weblogs, started experimenting, went on MySpace, went on Facebook. A lot of you kept in touch with me. I got emails from folks. And it was a remarkable testament to the power of hearing a message and then doing something about it. You didn't just say, oh, that was interesting, and then go back to what you were doing. You actually challenged what was going on back at home. And it was wild to watch the ripple effect over the next 6, 12, 24 months. And some of what I'll talk to you about today is to show you where we were and where we've come to. But I have about an hour, and then a workshop after that for any of you who are interested. What I'm going to try and do in the next hour is really focus on, if you will, a 101-201 comparison. Talk about some of the things you need to be thinking about, but then more importantly, how can you apply them and how can you know whether what you're doing is actually working? Hopefully it will provoke some questions. Please feel free to interrupt. I never like when I get to the end of my slides without questions being asked. And I want to make sure that you walk away feeling like, unlike last time where it was more of a discussion of here are some things that are going on, here are things you should know about, here are things you should think about. Hopefully at the end of this discussion you will know not only what you can be doing but why you should be doing them, and what would be good indicators of whether or not they were working for what you're trying to accomplish. So can we switch over to my slides? So in 2006, one of the sites I told you about, a site you may have heard about, YouTube, this is the screenshot I used. Now, it's a little bit hard to read on this screen, but there were a total of 158 videos on YouTube with the word Lutheran in the title. Okay, now, 2 years later, we are on YouTube. Whoop, come back. I got an itchy trigger finger here. Let's go back here. There are nearly 7,000. I did a similar search for sermon. There were 500 at YouTube in 2006. Anybody want to guess how many there are in 2008? 37,500. Now, I'll grant you that a good third of those are Reverend Wright sermons that have been... And sadly, I'm really not kidding. A lot of people wanted to make sure folks saw those. In 2006... I talked about Facebook. You may remember I didn't talk much about it, right? I mentioned it in passing. Well, the reason I mentioned it in passing, if you can see what Facebook's homepage looked like 2 years ago, basically told you to go away, because if it wasn't already on your campus, then you couldn't get in. So I mentioned it in passing and said some of your students, either in your congregations or at your seminaries, might be using it, but for the most part, it was irrelevant to us. True story, about 6 months after that presentation, Facebook had opened up. Anyone could join Facebook. And I'm a geek. I like playing around. Wanted to know what all the fuss was about. So I got a Facebook account. And every couple of days on the train, at the time I was still living in Illinois, would get on Metro in Naperville and would take the train into Chicago. And I have an internet connection in my computer so I could get work done while on the train. And so I load up and I'm answering some friend requests on Facebook and responding to messages. And, well, I know I have 3 kids, but I like to think I'm a fairly young guy. A very attractive young woman sits down next to me. She's got her headphones in, and she's texting on her cell phone. About 10 minutes into the train ride, something catches her eye on my laptop screen. And she kind of does one of these jumps. And then, thankfully, her headphones are in, so most of the train heard what she said, which was, "Oh my God, they let old people on Facebook?" And boy, how do you answer that? I don't know. Who's old? So, yes, in fact, they do let us old folks on Facebook. And there are a lot of us using Facebook today who are Lutheran. In fact, there's an ELCA Lutherans group which has over 500 members. We'll talk about how many in just a moment. I had dinner with Beth Lewis, CEO at Augsburg Fortress, last night, and I was talking about this and actually included this screenshot after talking the example through with Beth. I was stunned when Facebook, one of the things it does, and we'll talk more about this in the workshop for anyone that's interested, but Facebook lets you search your network. Now, your network are people you've directly connected to, or people who work at the company you work at but you may not know, or went to the school you went to but you do not know. So it's a way of searching the subset of the Facebook population that has some connection to you. There's over 400 people in my network who are on Facebook who are Lutheran, who've identified themselves as Lutheran. So that's not even, there could be more, but these are people who've actually taken the time to customize their profile and indicate in their religious views that they are Lutheran. I mean, we're talking about CEOs of partners that I've worked with for years, co-workers, one guy 2 doors down from me, who we don't talk about religion in day-to-day existence at Google. And so suddenly, and I'd never done this, had no idea. And now I have connections to people and something to talk about them with and ways of identifying and affiliating with them that I did not know existed and would not be evident to me without Facebook. So anybody know how many total members there are in the ELCA group at Facebook? It's over 500, but anybody want to take a guess? 3,000? It is a total of 3,871. Now, how many of you have a Facebook page today? See, this is great. See? 2 years ago, I asked how many had a weblog. No one raised their hand. This is wonderful. So let's keep going. In 2006, I talked about podcasting, right, as a way of reaching your audience. By August of 2006, about 55 million iPods had been sold. Now, that's a big number. In 2008, almost 125 million have been sold. Now, if you think about captive audiences for a communication, this is a portable audio device that I think the number now is 70% of all cars sold in the U.S., new cars, are compatible with the iPod. So commuters need something to listen to. Not a lot worthy of listening to on the radio. If they subscribe to a podcast that you produce, you can be talking to them while they're in their car on their way to work or from work. Students who are away at school can still get your message even while 1,000 miles away. Tremendous possibility there. I ran a quick survey. This is using Google Trends. How many of you don't know what Google Trends is? Okay, actually that's not as many as I would have thought. So Google Trends, google.com/trends. You punch in the terms that you're interested in, and we'll tell you, relative to the other terms, how popular those terms are at Google, as evidenced by search volume. So I did blogs, Facebook, MySpace, YouTube. Now, in August of 2006, right to the left of the A flag, right, I made that provocative statement, you'll recall, if you're not on MySpace, you're not on the internet. Well, in my defense, MySpace was far and away the most searched topic of these four. But then an interesting thing happened. At the end of 2006, YouTube took off. And now YouTube, by this benchmark, is the internet. And then look at that. By the end of 2007, Facebook had gone from almost nothing, because old people weren't allowed on Facebook, to look at the power of old people. By the end of 2007, we had brought it out of its infancy. And now Facebook has taken over MySpace in terms of search trend activities. Now, that's not to say MySpace is no longer popular. It remains a very powerful social networking platform. But the fact of the matter is that in a very short period of time, the landscape has changed fundamentally in where people are going for content and what they expect from the producers of content. Now, we're going to hope that the audio works here. So one thing I did want to share, MySpace related, since I did make that statement 2 years ago about if you're not on MySpace, you're not on the internet. This particular individual is new since 2006 to MySpace, and I thought was a great example of what can be done.
She's a single straight Libra who loves dancing with her iPod and watching Fiddler on the Roof.
The King of Kings!
Sister Rebecca isn't your typical nun. How many nuns do you know who have a MySpace page? Or play the electric guitar? But these are the places her street ministry takes her to connect with people and spread her message of love.
I feel like everything is one. It's like one people, one God, one planet. It's like all illusions gone of our separateness, and we are just one.
And while Sister B once wanted to be a rock star,
I'll pause there. There's more to the video, and we'll show if I have more time. But I can't think of a more perfect framing for this discussion than in our devotions, hearing about wherever my family is, there I am, and listen to what Sister B, also known as the MySpace nun, said. These are the places where her street ministry takes her. This is where her community is. This notion of connecting, at the end of the day, any of what I'm talking about is facilitating ways in which people connect. And that increasingly, hopefully obvious, these are the tools people expect to be able to use to make those connections. It's wonderful. I actually was on her MySpace page a couple of days ago. Hundreds of friends, lots of activity, young kids, older folks, sending messages to her. She's responding. A bunch of videos on YouTube that she's added. It's really wonderful to see, and I think a terrific example of how the medium can be used. She's not trying to impose her own expectations on this community, but in fact, instead is going there. Now, here's an interesting comparison to her MySpace experience. About a week after I was here in 2006, I got an email from someone in the audience. And this person was all excited and took the MySpace challenge to heart and went back to the Synod and created a MySpace page for the Synod. And at the Monday morning meeting, told his colleagues what he'd done, and at the meeting was told in no uncertain terms, take it down. And was told to take it down because the quote was, our parents are trying to keep their children off of MySpace. We can't be seen as encouraging that behavior. Now, I'm sympathetic to that. I understand that, and for people who don't live and breathe this stuff, it's very easy to see on the news that somebody went off to Germany to meet her boyfriend that she met on MySpace and had never actually met, and blame that on MySpace. That's not MySpace's fault. And I understand that it's challenging the way things have been done. And I understand that there are some parents who may have read those same news stories and said, absolutely not, my children aren't allowed on MySpace. But you know what? There are millions of people on MySpace. Millions of people who are looking for connections. Millions of people who want to talk about things that are important to them. And you know what? A lot of them have questions about all manner of things. Some of them have questions about God. And if you're not there answering those questions and leading by example and speaking to them where they are, somebody else is. Now, something that I had no exposure to in 2006, I would show up on Sunday, go to church, often be in the back with my screaming daughter, who continues that tradition to this day. But I had no exposure to the leadership of the church. I had no exposure to the challenges the church faces. And now, sitting on the board at Augsburg, communicating with a number of you after the 2006 event, I'm much more in tune with the challenges we face. Declining membership, increasing numbers of people who don't respond to a particular faith, but are going to non-denominational churches. That's a real challenge. It's not just a challenge at Augsburg for our business. It is a challenge for us as leaders of the church. Now, this is an audience that is doubling every 18 months. Well, guess what? If you want to maybe slow that decline down, go to where the growth is and figure out how to engage them. Talk to them. Follow Sister B's example and figure out that that's where the ministry is taking you. Okay, I'm going to shift gears a little bit. Changing from what we were talking about in 2006 to 2008, let's talk a little bit about specific tools you need to be thinking about using and then how you would know whether or not what you're doing is working. I'm going to start with an example of what not to do. This is an email I received about 6 weeks ago from a candidate here in Illinois. For those of you keeping score, I left Illinois 14 months ago. And this is the email. Right? And then it continues. And then it finishes up. I heard someone say it's a press release. It's not an email. That's exactly right. Now, how many press releases do you mail out to your communities? The individuals, not the press. It's the reason they call it a press release. Right? It's not a constituent release for this campaign. Here are some of the things that I saw that are wrong with this email. First of all, the subject line. All right, all caps, rookie mistake. Bad idea. Even worse is the fact that this subject line is the same as every other email this guy has sent me. All right, now, here's a very practical reason why that's a bad idea. Not least of which is it annoys me. It's because if you use a program like Gmail, which I do for obvious reasons, now put food on my table, programs like Gmail will often collapse conversations, and we'll look at the subject line, and if the subject line is the same as the next 9 messages from that sender, it'll collapse them all into one, and you'll only see the most recent, or it will get buried, or it might look like spam if you've gotten a lot of the, quote, same message from that sender. Another bad practice, he sent the message to himself and BCC'd me. Okay? And we'll talk more about why that's a really bad idea in a moment. But hello? Question? Why would he do that? Well, I'll give you the charitable answer. I think there's perhaps another force at work. He would do that because, A, he's not using an email delivery service, which I'll talk about in just a moment. He's probably using Outlook or Outlook Express or something where he's just got a spreadsheet of email addresses and he copies them all into the BCC field and then hits send. Now, which is better than the to field, which is much better than the to field, but both are really bad. Next bad thing, it's a press release. Talk to me. Don't talk at me. I'm not a member of the press. I'm some guy you're spamming. At least do me the favor of telling me why you're spamming me. And then, most ridiculous of all, the contents of the press release that were in the body of the email are attached as a Word document. So I, like a fool, opened the attachment thinking, I give the guy the benefit of the doubt, maybe there's a reason he's sending it to me, and then I'm looking at the same message in a different program. Needless to say, I sent a curt message to this guy. The last thing that's actually wrong with this email, which isn't obvious from looking at this, there's no way for me to get off of his list. Right? There's no unsubscribe link. Okay? Now, because he's a candidate, and because most of you are going to be associated with nonprofits, the Can Spam Act that has passed in the last couple of years doesn't apply to you. But just because it's not illegal doesn't make it a good idea. So here's an example of a great email. There's a site called techpresident.com. They identified this as the perfect email. Now let's talk about why. Well, very simply, it's branded so you know who it's coming from. It looks good. It's addressed personally to the person to whom it was sent. The paragraphs are short and snappy and to the point. The call to action, the sense of urgency, is bold-faced. This is the one thing this email is about. Make calls. It's signed, so I know who it's coming from. But this is conversational. This is talking to me, not at me. This is not a press release coming from the campaign. I want to just summarize. People who you work with, people in your communities, expect to get email. I tend not to like it as much. I have different ways that I want people to communicate with me. We'll talk about those maybe in the workshop. But email, there was a survey just done a couple of months ago. 23% of the respondents' time in email is on what they called permission email. So nearly 1 in 4 of every minute spent in email is email sent by someone that person has elected to receive email from. The only category that was higher was friends and family. It was more email than they do at work, which, if I'm the employer, I might have an issue with. The notion of an easy subscribe, unsubscribe, I cannot state this enough. You are intruding on their day when you communicate with them. You are sending a message that is not a personal message to one person. You are sending a message to however many are on your list. Make it easy for them to tell you to shut up. Yeah?
I see these and I sometimes don't bother to hit unsubscribe because I'm afraid it puts me on a list that justifies my email opens me up for spam. How do you tell when it's legitimate?
I don't think there's a magic rule. Generally, I'm in the same camp. If I get an email from someone I've never heard of, currently I'm battling someone who has my cell phone number, and they're trying to extend my warranty on my car. Well, no, they're not. And they give you, push 2 to be removed from this list. Well, guess what? Pushing 2 doesn't do anything. Apparently, I think it schedules you for the next call in 6 weeks. My rule when evaluating that, if it's a reputable sender, then I'm implicitly trusting them. Now, this yo-yo that sent me the email from the congressional candidate, I sent him a terse but relatively polite email that just said, please take me off your list. I don't live in Illinois anymore. And then when the next email came 3 weeks later, I said, like I said the last time, I don't live in Illinois. I don't like getting your emails. By the 4th, I was snippy. And he tried to explain to me why it was that I was still getting these emails. And I said, you know what? I've advised 2 presidential campaigns. I know where you got my email address from, and I know how you can take it off. Get your act together. The reality is you can always click the report spam button, right, in Gmail or in AOL or others. And that's actually a very important lesson. If you don't make it easy for people to take themselves off the list, or worse, if you make it easy for them to take off their list and you don't take them off your list, they're going to do the next easiest thing, which is just to click that spam button. And guess what happens when you do that? You go into the penalty box as a sender, and your domain may get quarantined, and your ability to send email as an organization may be curtailed. So the last thing you want to do is encourage people to take the path of least resistance, which is reporting you as a spammer. So the easy unsubscribe, subscribe option is very important. Now, my big thing here is, first of all, show of hands, how many of you send somewhat regular email from your organization? Okay, great. How many of you are sending those from an email program like Outlook or Outlook Express or Gmail or something else? Okay, so about half. Let me tell you why you need to stop doing that. You don't have any idea whether those emails are working. You don't know how many people are reading them. You don't know how many people are clicking on a link in those emails to come back to your website. You don't know how many of those messages are bouncing, potentially. And because you don't know that, you don't know if you're wasting your time or not. I'm going to show you a quick summary report that you can get from an email service. Real quickly, I'll come back to that point. Here's an example of an email that Augsburg Fortress sends out. Now, I want to call your attention to, not only do they make it easy to unsubscribe, which we'll see in a minute, but they give you a forward to a friend button. Now, many of us would see that and say, oh, well, they could just hit forward on their email program. However, if you put a button there that's just as easy as hitting the forward button, now you as a marketer, you as a communicator, know that the forward has happened, which is a really important indicator of how engaged your audience is with your communication. Make it easy to unsubscribe? Click here. You click that button, you're never going to get email again. That's a really important way of respecting the relationship with the user. Now, when you send through, and unfortunately this is going to be a little tough to see on the screen here, but when you send these out, you get what percentage of your messages were opened. All right? Now, that in and of itself is really valuable information. But if you can see here, there's a message that was sent in, it looks like March of 2008, that had an 11% open rate. And there was a message sent in January of 2008 that had a 77% open rate. Well, guess what? More like that, less like the March email. If you don't know that those open rates are so drastically different, you have no idea that the one you sent in January, for whatever reason, worked. You threaded the needle, and nearly everyone that was on the recipient list opened it. Yes?
Let's consider it open. We're having this conversation in our office right now with this program. Some people won't click on the email and actually open it up. They might just read what's like on your Outlook. You don't have to click it open. You can see on the screen. So that's not considered open, correct?
The way most of these services determine whether an email has been opened or not is that they're embedding a little image that's invisible, so the end user doesn't see it. But when that image is rendered, right, when the email program says to the server, give me that invisible image, the server's recording that as an open. Now, if they're looking at the preview in Outlook or they're reading the subject line in Gmail or whatever the case may be, that image doesn't get rendered, and you're right, it's not being opened. So it is not an accurate to the individual recipient measurement of open, but it is directionally indicative of what you're doing, because most people are, in fact, reading their email. Now, it does require that they are looking at the images, because if the images don't get rendered, right, Outlook and Gmail and others often give you the option of not rendering images. Guess what? Most people like a well-formatted page and will turn images on by default. That used to be a bigger issue, incidentally, but because spam filtering has gotten much, much better over the last couple of years, it's less of a concern that the images are being used for spamming people. Most of those messages are getting queued to the junk mailbox. Yes?
Following up, the previous email you showed us had a message and then a click here to open. So the next step is having to click that to actually get the info. And so does that count as open?
The open is... So there's two different metrics. There's the open within the email program, and there's the click-through back to whatever site you are telling them to go visit. Might be a sign-up page, might be the seminar info page, that sort of thing. So you'll notice that this service is telling you not only what the open rates of the emails are, but the click-through rates as well, right? So you, as a communicator, if you're using email and you're sending from Outlook, Outlook Express, Thunderbird, Gmail, whatever the case may be, you don't know any of this. And as a result, you don't know what your recipients want you to be saying or how they want you to be saying it, which is data that is eminently obtainable if you used a service like this to send those emails out on their behalf. In 2006, I told you about weblogs, and I gave you some examples. Chronological presentation of content, posts having permalinks. More links you get, the more votes you get. The more votes you get, the more likely it is that you win. Guess what? In 2008, same rules apply. This has not changed at all. Weblogs remain the single most cost-effective, scalable way of increasing your visibility in Google. They're easy, they're quick. There is no one who can claim they don't have enough time to maintain a weblog, because if they have enough time to send an email once in a while, they have enough time to post to a blog. Now, the 201 discussion with weblogs is not just having a blog. That's step one. Google Blog Search is one of a couple of different ways of searching blog content. blogsearch.google.com. You can go to Google Blog Search and you can type in a query, and you can see who is talking about that query right now. So this is not searching all the web pages that Google has ever found. This is searching in chronological order things that people have said about a topic that you care about. So before our last board meeting in April up in the land of 10,000 lakes, I sat down with Augsburg's staff and told them about this and said, this is a wonderful way for you to know when there's a conversation happening somewhere out in the ether about you. And I couldn't have planned it any better. Wouldn't you know that that very day, one of our new authors had posted on his blog. Jake is a youth minister in Iowa. And he had posted, scanned the letter from Augsburg Fortress. I've been hired. How excited am I? This is great. This is a first step. The guy was thrilled. And I said to the staff, I said, look, this is a chance to blow the guy out of the water. Instead of just having him talk within his circle of friends, you get to show up and say, hey, we've been listening for people talking about Augsburg Fortress, and we're thrilled to have you on board. And that's what they did. So Tim Paulson leaves a quick comment and says, congratulations, I'm pretty new to the publisher group at Augsburg as well. Really happy to have you on board. Keep in touch. Now, what has just happened is you've closed the loop. All right? You've not inserted yourself into a conversation where you're not welcome, but you're letting Jake know if you need a face, a name to follow up with at Augsburg, give me a call. Now, I have done this for years. It takes no time whatsoever. None. The number of people who now know if they have a question about FeedBurner, Google for that matter, that they can find me and ping me. Every couple of weeks, I'll get an email all over the world. Hey, had a question about. Now, the goodwill that buys me, and more importantly, my employer, is incalculable. Google is often seen as just this giant behemoth that no one can talk to. But now they have a name. Now they have someone that they can interact with. This doesn't take much time. But as a way of getting into the middle of the conversation and fostering those connections, it is immeasurable. Now, I'm going to pivot here and tell you a personal story about how connections get made on blogs and how they can reap incredible rewards. As you heard in the intro, I've been involved in a couple of presidential campaigns, which there's a sub-segment of folks on the internet who are politically active who have some sense of who I am. And there's this husband and wife in Los Angeles who were very active in the Dean campaign, and they knew of me, and they apparently kept tabs on me. Just they liked my blog, and so they read it from time to time. Well, Dan wrote a book, wrote a novel, and they self-published the novel because they couldn't get a major publishing house to answer their calls. And when it came time to try and build buzz for the book, they really didn't have many options at their disposal. And at some point, his wife, Michelle, says to Dan, well, you know, that Rick guy that we know from the Dean days, he writes about tech. He seems like a bit of a nerd. So maybe we could send him a copy. So they sent an email. Now, I'd never talked to these folks. I didn't know them. But they sent an email and said, hey, you know, we read your blog, thought we would send you a copy of the book. Would you mind if we did that? And I said, you know, no, that'd be great. Free book. I'm going on vacation in a couple of weeks. I'll have it in the briefcase and if I get around to it. Well, guess what? It's the best technology novel I have ever read. And I read a lot. And it is without question. I actually turned to my wife on the plane on our way back from Colorado. I said, I need to make this guy famous. Now, I'm not a guy that makes people famous. That's not... And you can imagine what my wife said to me on the plane. She looked at me and was like, yeah, go change her diaper. So, okay, fast forward a couple of weeks. I start putting Dan in touch with people who I've met through my blog. Other technology execs, various people. One of the people I put him in touch with is a guy named John Robb. John Robb is a former Special Forces fighter pilot who also happened to be a CEO of a tech company who is now writing a book on open source warfare. And John and I bizarrely met about 6, 7 years ago and have kept in touch periodically. And some of the themes John writes about I thought were kind of similar to what was in this technology novel, writing about new ways of non-state actors waging war. And John reads it and has the same reaction I do. Where'd this guy come from? It's ridiculously good. So John, in turn, puts him in touch with Joy Ito. Joy Ito is an investor in a number of technology companies, including one I used to work for. And Joy, because John and I both said you need to read it, read it. And Joy says, oh my God, where'd this guy come from? So Joy, after reading it, puts it in Stuart Brand's hands. Stuart Brand founded The Well, which is the original electronic community out of San Francisco from the late 70s. Well, about 2 months ago at Google, we're coming up on the 25th anniversary of War Games. So we had a copy of the film to watch because we're a bunch of geeks and kind of the original geek movie. But because we're Google, we didn't just have the movie, we also had the 2 screenwriters and the consultant to the production there for a Q&A. You can imagine coming from a 25-person startup to this is a little interesting. So in that Q&A, the consultant to the production makes a comment about a business partner of his and mentions Stuart Brand. And I thought, well, that's kind of odd. That's the guy that... And I knew that morning, the author had sent me an email and said, you know, you're never going to believe this, but I've got a book deal. Penguin Books is going to publish my novel. Whoa. right? So after the Q&A session wraps up, I go up to this consultant, and I said, this is kind of a strange small world connection, but you mentioned business partner of yours, Stuart Brandon. He was really helpful in getting a buddy of mine a book deal, and I just wanted to pass along my thanks because I feel some ownership to that whole process, and it's really exciting. And he looks at me and he goes, "You're talking about Demon." I said, "Yeah, how do you know about Demon?" He goes, "Well, it wasn't Stuart that got him the book deal. The head of the publishing house is my tennis partner." And then, and it's absolutely true story, he points to the screenwriter over in the corner who's talking to Sergey, our founder, and he says, "And that guy who wrote War Games, well, after he was a screenwriter, he kind of went on to bigger things and ran DreamWorks for 12 years. He's making the movie." I share that story. I mean, yeah, it's really cool. There's a book that I read that's going to be a movie, but it's because all of us were part of a larger community that found each other by making these connections. And we read each other's content, we let comments on each other's blogs, and we got engaged. If we had all stood on the sidelines and just let the other people have those conversations, those connections never get made, and the community never forms, and the great results that are supposed to happen don't in fact happen. So let's talk a little bit more about social networks. I did a search, as I mentioned earlier, for Lutherans on Facebook, and I did a search for groups specifically. There are a lot of groups, more than 500, that have the word Lutheran in the title. I have one in particular that is my absolute favorite. And here are some fun, hot and Lutheran since 1517. It was kind of funny. Now, this is just a tad off color, but I had to share it. And it is the Coalition of Lutheran Badasses, whose description is, does the idea of drinking beer, studying theology, thumbing your nose at the Roman Catholics, enjoying delightful potlucks, drinking coffee, playing cribbage, starting a revolution, and marrying an ex-nun sound appealing? If so, join because Martin Luther would. This group has over 1,000 members. There is community out there that we can all be engaged in. And sometimes with a sense of humor, sometimes not. Just so that we're clear, not just searching on Lutheran, but actually searching on ELCA. And there's over 200 groups with the word ELCA in the title. So, testament to all of you in this room, who I think can take a lot of credit for the growth that has happened in such a short period of time. We are engaged. Now, 201 of social networks is not going where the community already is, but building your own. How many of you know what the Creative Worship Tour is? Okay, good. This is something that, and Beth, correct me if I'm wrong, an intern started, right? An intern at Augsburg Fortress started, where he started going to congregations to talk about the production of the service, whether it's writing the sermon, whether it's producing the music, whatever the case may be. Went around the country, shot a lot of video. I'm going to swap out of the slideshow here in a moment to show you a couple of those videos. Yeah, we're doing okay on time. And now more than 300 people belong to this site. This is built with a company called Ning, N-I-N-G, which I'll confess, when I first heard about Ning, I thought, what's the big deal? The premise of Ning is that it allows you to build your own social network. And my initial reaction was, well, why would I build a separate one when Facebook already exists or MySpace already exists? And I think the answer depends much on the circumstances. But in this case, what you're doing is creating a completely enclosed community which has a very specific purpose. Whereas Facebook is a more general purpose, talk to your friends, share your pictures, upload videos, comment on walls, give people a little stein of beer as a gift for $1, which I've never really understood. This has a very specific purpose, which is engage the people with whom the intern started, and then expand that community so that the connections get made and get stronger. So now what's happened is you've got people who are now connecting to each other and who are formed around a very specific purpose. These can become vibrant. Generally speaking, these can be tough to maintain if you don't get to critical mass, right? Critical mass may just be a dozen. It might be 1,000 in different cases. But you need to have a fairly well-defined purpose that you're trying to accomplish. The beauty of Ning is it's free. Everything I've shown you today, by the way, is free. And it still gives you the ability to add much of the same functionality, sharing videos, sharing photos, etc. So I want to show you real quickly here.
Hey everybody, what's up? Josh Lindman here for the Creative Worship Tour Day 18. We are in Iowa, and sorry it's been a while since I updated you last, but been pretty busy. But now, that I'm here in Iowa, there's not much to do. And so, not much but me and the corn. And so I decided, this would be a good time to update y'all. And just want to let you know that you should check out some videos. I went to Heritage Church yesterday. It's a church in Rock Island, Illinois, and really had a great time talking with 3 of their creative team members. And yes, so you should check that out. Some great stuff about building relationships on the team.
So I want to then show you just one of the example videos.
I think part of our journey of change required us to, if you can just imagine sort of a pendulum that swings back and forth. We were over here on this side, just very inward focused, very much just about having a good time. Unchurched people would come in, not be able to make sense of what's happening. They weren't finding it relevant for their lives. And so what we realized was that the only way we really could change mindsets was to take this pendulum and swing it way over on the other side. And so there was a period of time that I think probably we were a lot further over on this side than we are right now. But it required that. To go this much would not have changed the culture. It would have been too close to what we were. And so we had to swing that pendulum way over on this side. And by doing that, I think what's happening now is we're sort of finding our way back down now and saying, okay, where is that balance, Balance is probably, I don't know if that's the right word to use or not, but I know for us, we constantly say to people, we will always be a church that is more focused on those outside of these walls than those on the inside.
So I share those both as an example of how Josh is using the medium to keep folks engaged and know that there's updated content and feel like it's vibrant. But also that video is a great example of 2 people who Josh met with personally who are now part of this community. And that community doesn't have geographic boundaries, right? The beauty of this is that others who are interested in figuring out how to swing their pendulum to deal with the unchurched versus the churched, now they have much greater understanding of who they might connect to further that conversation. It used to be before these tools were available to us, we didn't know how to find those people, and so we ended up being relatively isolated. And so as a result, you don't get to build on anyone else's best practices. In the best of worlds, those connections are made which allow the sharing of the best practices. All right, let's talk about measurement, how to know when what you're doing online is working. This is a screenshot from Google Analytics. I built a site in January and February called superdelegates.org. Obviously, I'm very politically interested, and after talking to a friend on the Obama campaign, it was pretty clear that Super Tuesday wasn't going to end the race, and that the superdelegates were probably going to matter, and no one knew who the superdelegates were or how the process worked. And I thought, well, that's a problem I could solve. So the domain remarkably was available. I went and spent the $7 on the domain and created a wiki, used the same software that powers Wikipedia, and got a roster of all the superdelegates from the DNC, and then uploaded it to the wiki and just basically opened the doors and said to anyone, if you want to tell us more about who these superdelegates are, where they live, what their job is, are they a congressman, are they a county judge, are they a pastor, are they whatever. And in the span of about 6 weeks, we had profiled all 796 superdelegates. And more importantly, we had captured who they were endorsing. Now, here's the remarkable thing, absolutely true story about this site. I started the site, and the first week or so, a lot of my time at night and on weekends, to just get the basics of the data in. Then a curious thing happened. CNN profiled it on their program, and the server crashed. And so we moved servers to accommodate that. That was that big spike over there, right at the left. But as a result of that, people all over the world saw that there was a site that was telling them who these superdelegates were, which means people who were searching at Google for information about superdelegates were finding the site. And once they figured out it was a wiki, they figured out that they could update it. I knew I had a winner when I was notified about a major superdelegate endorsement, and I thought, well, I'll take a minute and I'll go to the superdelegate site and I'll update the page to remark that they've endorsed Obama. And this dude in Finland had already done it. Now, I don't even know if he's American, who just happens to be living in Finland, or if he's a Finnish guy who's just really interested in inside baseball of Democratic Party politics. But he and an engineer at Intel became the two people who updated the site within minutes of the news hitting the wire. I stopped having to update the site by about the third week of February. Now, you can probably guess what the peaks are, right? That represents page views. Who knows? Primary days. So what happened was, whenever there was a voting day, all the news the next day would be, yep, superdelegates are going to matter. And everybody went to Google and, what the hell is a superdelegate? And they'd find my site and they'd come and they'd see. So using Google Analytics, how many of you have a website and don't measure page views, visitors, length of time on site? It's okay to raise your hand. It's not. This is a service that used to cost thousands of dollars a year. We acquired them, incorporated it into Google Services. It's now free. It takes 2 minutes to incorporate Google Analytics into your site. I'm not exaggerating. 2 minutes. You add one line of code to your pages, and you're done. And then we start gathering information about who's coming to your site. Where did they come from? Right here, referring sites sent 51,000, almost 52,000 visits via a total of 1,000 different URLs. So 1,000 sites sent traffic to superdelegates.org in the 5 months that it's been in well, 6 months. We can see that Wikipedia by far sent the most traffic, but then it continues on, and I can see where the traffic came from. For your perspectives, why is that important? Well, if there are sites that are sending a lot of traffic your way, well, you might want to get to know them, right? It might be that they have more traffic they could send you if they knew what you were up to. It might be that they're saying things about you, right? Go back to that conversation moment that you need to know about. Might be that there's an opportunity over where they are to answer questions, talk to them, engage them. Knowing what people are searching for and how they're finding you is something that I'm always shocked when I find out people aren't aware of what searches are driving traffic to their site. Google Analytics will tell you which words people are using to find you. Now, if you're a church, you'll probably find that often they're looking for hours of service, directions, those kinds of things. You need to make sure that if those are the things people are searching for, do the search yourself and figure out if you're searching for that, follow the link to your site. Does the link on your site give you the information you were looking for? Often it doesn't. Often it's if you're interested in finding out the hours of our service, please fill out this form. And no. Make sure you know what they're looking for and make sure that it's easily available when they get there. Also, the 301 of this would be that you can do programming on your site that takes into account what they've searched for and then present them certain options based on those queries. Hey, I see you were searching for X. You might be interested in Y and Z. Understanding which pages on your site drive the most traffic. People are often surprised by this data. Right? You put a lot of time and effort into maintaining a website, but if you're not actually, if you can't tell me what the top 10 pages on your site are, then you don't know where you should be focusing your time and energy in maintaining the site. How many of you are uploading videos to YouTube? Okay, good. About 6-8 months ago, we launched what we call Insight on YouTube, which tells you all the data you could ever want to know about how often your video is viewed, where people are coming from that are viewing the video, and, most amazing, demographics. Not surprisingly, the Superdelegates video is not a big hit for the 0 to 24 crowd. But learning that there are certain videos that are a hit for 18 to 24 versus 45 and over would be very helpful in evaluating the popularity of your videos. And you'll be surprised by the data. Okay. I've given presentations about Google Tools now for the year that I've been at Google. How many of you know what Webmaster Tools is? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Actually, you beat my last audience by about a factor of 2. This is, for anyone managing a website, the single most important thing I'm going to tell you today. Webmaster Tools is for you as a site owner. We're going to tell you things like how many total pages on your site are in the Google index. The index is our word for just what's searchable at google.com. We're going to tell you any errors we're getting when we're trying to include content on your site in our index. Page not found, server response errors, things like that. When those errors happen, you should know about them and you should fix them. But by the way, unless you have someone who's looking through your logs on the server, you would never know that these errors were happening. Any pages that are linked on the outside world, people have linked into your site, links are good, unless the link itself doesn't exist. The link doesn't exist because you moved a page, you updated the website, you renovated the site, whatever. You should know that those links still exist, and there are programmatic ways of redirecting. You came here looking for abc.html, but we've actually renamed it def.html. If you don't do that, 5 minutes, okay. If you're not doing that, you're losing visitors because all they see is a server error when they come to your site. We're going to notify you, by the way, when there are problems. If your site's been hacked, we're going to pull you out of the index. So you're not searchable at all. And you should know when that happens. So this is an overview that's going to tell you when we last included your content in the index, whether pages are included in the index or not. And we're going to tell you all those errors. Now, as you can see from this, I'm a very lazy site owner. Google tends to keep us kind of busy. So I've not fixed all these errors on my site because at the end of the day, it's not all that important to me. But if this were my job, I would want zeros down that list. And I would bet for most of you, you would find errors in the first time you set up an account. Google.com/webmasters. No. It is for any website because by definition, it's for any content included in our index. Google Insight, this is kind of the next iteration of Google Trends, which will tell you more data about the search terms themselves. So I did a search for Lutheran, somewhat discouraging, but not all that surprising. Search volume over time is down about 30%. That number is actually fairly consistent with other numbers we know about in the church. Understanding where the searches are coming from, you can either restrict this to a particular country and then see the states within the country, or you can look at it worldwide. But understanding what people are searching for, we at Google are giving you a lot of that data. So if you're building a site and you want to capture a certain segment of audience, you want to know what's going on. This is a 201 or 301 level idea. How many of you have been involved in the meeting that says, we need to fix the website? And the 8 people around the table have 97 opinions about how to fix the website. This should be more blue, the button should be on the left, not the right. We should do tabs, no, we should do bullets, we should do icons. Website Optimizer is a tool that allows you to test. Just let the data tell you what works. So on a page, You take the page and you say, okay, right here, I don't know what the right thing is. I don't know if the description needs to go above the video or below the video. Or I don't know if the buttons should be laid out horizontally or vertically. So you define the space on the page that you want to test, and you come up with version A, version B, version C, and then we'll test it for you. And when we have a statistically significant sample, we'll tell you which one works. So now when those 8 people are around the table, you don't have to say, well, we have to pick one and do it. And you say, all right, tell me what you want, tell me what you want, tell me what you want. We'll test them all, and you are wrong. Okay, last thing I'm going to talk, yes?
I have a very simplistic question.
Mm-hmm.
Why is Google offering all this stuff to us for free?
Why is Google offering all this stuff to you for free? Because we are not evil. No, so the honest answer is the better the quality of the content on the internet, the better our ability is to interpret that content and give the searcher what they're looking for. And we are obsessive about giving the user the thing that they're looking for. So the more we can do to make you better at making the content, the more likely it is that we can get the searcher what they want. Why is that valuable to us? The more searches that happen, the more money we make. So last thing I want to show you before we wrap this up. Google Docs. Collaborative word processing, spreadsheets, and presentations. Free and collaborative. What I mean by collaborative is, instead of emailing around a Word document to 9 people, having all 9 people make changes to the Word document, and then have you pull your hair out for the next week and a half trying to reconcile all the changes that have been emailed around, you're all working on the same document on the web. Free. Now, spreadsheets for me is the killer app, because it's how I gather data, right? What you want is you want everyone in this room to tell me what they want for dinner. And I want to put that in a spreadsheet, and then I want to evaluate the responses so I know that there's 37 chicken and 42 steak and 12 fish, and right? And then, in real time, I get to graph the results so that inside of 24 hours, I knew what the parents wanted, because I was able to create this result set where what I had to do was do a calculation, because it looks like those first 2 questions were what people really wanted, because the blue was the people who marked it as number 1. But if you see number 3, number 1 was pretty high, but 2 and 3 were equally high. And so the weighting of the answers told us that the thing that the parents really wanted us to do was to make a donation to the teacher classroom. Now, we surveyed 300 parents in under 24 hours and had an answer that was completely verifiable and didn't require any work. No one had to correlate the data. No one had to run the queries. All I had to do was get the questions from my wife, put them into the email. This is an incredibly powerful way to gather data, format it, and work collaboratively with small or large groups. Thank you.